go through. Okay, well, it's the hour now, guys. So firstly, thank you for everyone who's joined this webinar. I'm very, 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 very happy that we've got Daniel from Equinox Partners in the US, and Andy, who's the head of technology at Oldfield Partners, to join us on this call to really, look at what, do fund managers need to be thinking about when they're evaluating, digital marketing platforms. And, we've at ProFundCon, we've definitely seen an acceleration in the need for hedge funds to consider how do they go to market and how do they go across multiple channels. So what I do, Andy, do you want to introduce yourself to the audience, and then Daniel, I can ask you to do the same?
Sure. Glad to be here, Paul. So my name's Andy Roberts. I'm the head of technology for Oldfield Partners. I've been with the company for the last 3 years. We're a value manager based out of London, and we have 6 different strategies that revolve around global equity.
Super.
Over to you, Dan.
And a Liverpool fan, right?
Absolutely, for my sins.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Yes.
We like that.
Absolutely.
I didn't defend the title, so what can I say?
Well, it's just you don't want to. We had a massive run up to 2020, so we're just taking it easy this season. I think next season should be hopefully less injuries, and should be back on form.
Right, and as they say, you'll never walk alone. I think there's another Liverpool fan in the audience. So there you go. And Daniel, about yourself, my good friend.
Yep, Dan Schreck. You can probably tell from my incredible accent that I don't live in the UK. Instead, I grew up in Pittsburgh. I'm a Steelers fan. You guys don't even know who the Steelers are. It's fine. It's totally fine. But it's great. They're the best. So yeah, our firm's been around for 25 years. Roots go all the way back to kind of the beginning of value investing. And we specialize in really off-the-run assets. So we've really had a stretch. I've been at the firm for 12 years. I'm a partner. Stretch on the tech side to really find our target market. And that's how we came to Paul. And we've been using ProFundCom for probably, we've been speaking for about a year and onboarded kind of like 3 months ago. So far, so good. And we're really digging in at this point. So it's been great.
Super. Well, thanks for that, Daniel. So how are the Steelers doing?
We need a new quarterback.
Okay.
We need a new quarterback.
Okay.
Our quarterback, he tends to fluctuate from 300 to 350 pounds in the off season. So I think we're probably going to have to get someone new. He's also my age.
So did you get anyone on the first draft or not?
I'm not sure who we got. I watched through like the kind of 6th or 7th team. The draft was kind of a really funny thing this year.
Right.
So we'll see. Pittsburgh's a tough place to be a player, but
right.
Not too indifferent from the. Yeah.
There we go. Bonded by sports. So what I was going to do, I was just going to quickly talk about, the products that are out there. And, the products that are out there, how do you choose between something generic and something that's more niche? And it is that famous quote, which is, that from IBM, which is, think. And this is, their logo at the time. And, that quote where, nobody gets fired from buying IBM. And you can replace that with, nobody gets fired for buying Salesforce. Nobody gets fired for buying Marketo. Nobody gets fired. You just fill in the blanks as you go along. But what tends to happen, and this has been played out pretty much in 7-year cycles, is that if you tend to do what is logical, you actually end up where everybody else is. So if you effectively go generic, and spend lots of money kind of customizing something, you ultimately end up where everybody else is, and you actually don't get the value because you don't have the expertise, and not just the expertise, the real love and the humanity of building a great product. And the reason I kind of use the word humanity is because, the next slide is about thinking different. And when you kind of look at, what you look at something like Salesforce and IBM, they're all about shareholder value. And, the customer's kind of last in that process. And, the only professional in the room is their salesperson, the chump is you. But if you look at what Apple have done over the years, is they've always thought different. And that's because, Jobs was always about creating innovation and the humanity behind it. And you kind of see that in how the products evolve and the kind of longevity of that whole ecosystem that they've created. And effectively, probably after Samsung, the number two valued company in the tech space, in the hardware, software, tech space. So that's what we're kind of talking about here today, is how with your fund marketing and your selection of technology, you just go down the IBM route, or do you go down the think different Apple route? So what Daniel and Andy very kindly agreed to do is kind of talk around the 4 areas that helps you select a product, implement a product, the impact it has, and the kind of the critical success factors on the way. So I suppose, Daniel, starting with you, is, what have been your critical factors and what thoughts have you had, before you kind of went on your digital journey?
Yeah, I think the thing to understand is, I'll give you a story. I live in Greenwich, Connecticut, and it's kind of a rite of passage. When you turn 50 or 60 years old and you're a hedge fund manager, you go to buy a Ferrari.
Okay.
So, and when you go, I'm not going to do it. But when you go to buy a Ferrari, there's one down the road, and you go inside. The Ferrari dealership is beautiful, unbelievable cars. And a really nice, pretty woman comes out, and they give you champagne. You're like, wow, this is a really good presentation so far. And then finally, there's an older gentleman who kind of reminds you of your grandpa, and he comes out, and he says, would you like to take this for a spin? And he touches you on the shoulder. You're like, man, I really want to buy a Ferrari. Now, I can't afford a Ferrari. I have too many kids. Right. What's the point of the story? The point of the story is they've totally refined and defined that pitch for that target market. Now, look at hedge funds. Hedge fund marketing hasn't changed in 15 years, 10 years, whatever. Where you're sending allocators rather, a 50 to 100 page pitch deck. Everyone else is doing that. You're using this exact same words. You're using the same kind of email correspondence. Mm-hmm. So not only are you having a hard time identifying your target market, you're not really that good at engaging them. And the last point is you can't track their behavior. So I thought about that coming from the outside. I used to work at Sony Music and looking at how we market products to different target markets. And I saw this misalignment. And so then I began to think, and this is going back a decade, what if I could have better means to identify using technology who this target market is? And it's not like Ferrari customers. There's maybe 10,000 hedge fund customers for us in the entire world, right? And then what are the ways I can engage them? I think the reason I like ProFundCom for sure, there just aren't many comps. I've looked at lead forensics, et cetera. Right. Is now how do I get that kind of alternative behavioral data on them? And not too dissimilar, how can I have that same kind of customized pitch that a Ferrari has to make them feel like this is a story they can buy, I trust this manager. And so we've basically had to integrate a lot of different technologies, kind of streamline them into our CRM, and done a lot of neat things on the engagement side with videos and so on. But I think the most critical factor is if you don't know who's looking at what, you really don't know how best to follow up with them. So that's kind of been our trajectory. And over the last year, we've integrated all this stuff, and now we're finally rolling it out. And it really has, at the end of the day, created a better experience for our target market, right? Communicating ideas that they find valuable, and maybe valuable enough that they'll invest. So that's how we kind of came to it. Kind of a rambling answer, but that's kind of the major premise.
Right. So ultimately, it is tracking people's behavior, seeing what they're interested in, and creating effectively a smart funnel for you to go after people, right?
That's it.
Yeah. That was a good summary, I thought. And what about you, Andy?
I guess, I haven't got as entertaining a story as Daniel has, but I guess, the fundamental thing is you want to minimize time kind of reinventing the wheel. You want to be able to hit the ground running with a solution. So factors, functionality, it depends where you are in the journey. So, some people are quite aware of all the different assets, digital marketing assets they want to exploit. You may not be in that position. So a good logical step is to look at what your peers are doing, and then see, if there are solutions that are aligned to your peers' needs, hence the more specialized route that you can take. So in doing that, you then can kind of unearth, well, what's the scope of functionality that's on offer? What's the kind of time to market that we can get with a specialized solution versus the customization effort that you would have with a more generic, that you effectively want configuration, you don't want customization. Life is complex enough with the software that we all have to, to integrate. And then to your point around expertise, you want a firm that understands your kind of sensitivities, the regulatory, compliance, business goals around asset acquisition, client experience. You want it, low risk, focus on accuracy. So the expertise is a key component to assessing a vendor, and then the support as well. Daniel and I, we work for boutiques. We're all about white glove service. We want to work with software firms that operate that philosophy as well. So there has to be that kind of cultural element, and so the benefit we've seen with a specialized product across all of our marketing value chain, across the trading areas as well, is that consultative support model where you're getting high degrees of expertise at the front line. And all of these things help, keep the perception high, keep the, with the end users, and allows us to focus on, the IP of asset gathering and creating that kind of symbiotic relationship between the marketing and sales teams.
Because Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't you have a generic product at one stage and then you kind of moved over to something a bit more specialist?
Yeah, without being disparaging towards that product, yes. So when I joined the firm, some of the decisions we made were to displace certain generic solutions. We wanted to, reduce cost and get a bit of a head start on various efforts. And yes, on the digital marketing side, certainly it was a move there, and we've been very pleased with that.
So what was the thing? Because it's one of those things, it is one of, it's like sometimes you just end up living with stuff. And you could just say, Melinda Gates was just living with Bill Gates because he just had to. But there comes a point where you just, trade down, trade sideways. Was there a particular, inflection point that you kind of went and said, you know what, we need to go domain specific? Was there a point where the generic system stopped and kind of you need, and the other, and that, the non?
Yeah, I think it was definitely that, we had a view on the type of touch points, different digital marketing assets that we wanted to measure and analyze. There was going to be an effort to be able to bring those in. There was some gaps as well. And there was certainly a deficit on the side of the creative where, we wanted to be more engaged in, let's find new platforms where we can get content out there. Let's look at new ways that we can harness LinkedIn engagement. And it was that kind of imbalance of time and effort. We decided we wanted to go down the specialized route to get that kind of foundation in place with the technology. Can we on the outbound make sure that we've got low risk execution? On the inbound, are we able to understand the patterns of behavior from clients, analyze those, and use that as feedback to then improve on the creative side? And it was that kind of iterative process that we wanted to rapidly get in place. Sure. And yeah, I think going down the specialized road, it was definitely implementation wise, it kind of fulfilled our needs. Quick time to market, ability to co-pilot with the support team to help our guys get up and running, and then after a few campaigns, they could run autonomously. Right.
So Daniel, in your view, is hedge fund marketing that different from the kind of D2C and the kind of B2C financial marketing, or are there particular nuances that you need to have that level of analytics that you guys at Equinox are trying to pull out?
I mean, they are pretty different. When I was at Sony Music, we had to sell records, and you sold them to 30 different international markets. Right. And each market was a little different, but in some ways you had an archetype of who is the person I'm trying to sell to in Finland versus Brazil. And at the end of the day, you're creating a kind of a mirage of a personal relationship.
Right.
You really don't know the best band of all time, Radiohead, but you kind of feel like you know Tom York because you go to his concerts.
Sure.
And that's different here. And it's different here because you actually know your end client.
Right.
And so more traditional salesy, persuasive techniques actually turn folks off, because once you realize that you're being persuaded, you don't want to be, persuaded anymore. So, and I think the service providers don't usually get that because, one, they've never sat in our seat. And the big thing that got us to switch to more specialized vendors is that once you realized they were selling a product and their emphasis was on this, basically, maximizing the bottom line. I can think of one great instance. We go downtown, and I said, this is the specialized thing I need and would really help us. I think people in the industry would like it. At the end of the day, they're trying to sell one or two products. Yeah. And it kind of fits you, but not exactly.
Right.
And so it is, I think, somewhat different. I will say this, though, because of regulation, and this is super important, especially in the United States with a hedge fund, you're not allowed to generally solicit.
Right.
And because you can't generally solicit, it's really kind of the allocators in the space are the most innovative in the world.
Right.
Soros, Druckenmiller, et cetera. But the marketers aren't. And they aren't because you're not allowed to be.
Right.
And this changed in 2014 with the Jobs Act. That's not the Tax Act. It's the bill signed by Obama that allowed general solicitation if you check the box.
Sure.
But in the meantime, there was this confluence of tech as well that happened. And I think the industry hasn't quite caught up that you can use some of the best practices that they use in other industries here. But I think still the reliance is still on, I'm just going to smile and dial. So I think you have a great question, and it's a little of both. But we have a lot to learn from other industries, 100%.
Sure. And Andy, how have you found the behavioral change? And I'll ask this to you as well, Daniel, is once the sales team and the relationship managers are presented with this data and the marketing team?
Yeah, I think the sales team, they consider it a treasure trove of information. They, having it presented in different dimensions, being able to see, people who are re-engaging, people maybe after a while, new interest. So being able to filter on people who kind of, qualify as leads. Sure. All of those different ways of being able to capture dimensions of interest. I think it definitely helps in terms of being a clear, clearly defining the value that marketing are bringing to sales. And I think it's just something that helps keep the conversation going week on week. It's new data that can be actioned. Right. In response to situations, the market might change and bring tailwinds to various funds, and that'll then have a knock-on impact in terms of different client segments' interest in different products. It could be that the result of a campaign that we've done where we've maybe put some new thought leadership on a platform. So all this then gets driven back. We're able to then measure all these touch points, bring the data home, and then see what the output is and how we can adapt to that. So yeah, on the whole, it's been very useful for both teams. Right,
and there's been no resistance.
Well, no, absolutely not. I mean, this kind of thing is there's a clear value proposition.
Right.
I think we're in the stage of the game now is one where there's a consensus amongst most people, even the diehard kind of people that have been very slow to adopt the idea of digital. But I think really now we're especially in the post-pandemic era, there's a definite consensus that digital is the way forward. Many firms have gone forward and done the kind of level one cloud enablement of platforms. Sure. Now they're looking to get deeper. They're looking at areas around the investment process. How can we digitalize there and create an ongoing feedback loop in the decisions that we've made? And likewise with digital marketing, which is slightly more mature and evolved. It's just more of a continuation. How can we drive deeper? Yeah. Create enhanced client portals, all of that kind of thing. It's so I think classic areas of analog engagement like meetings and all of that, we've learned that we want to really take that friction out And
Right.
we can then put the measurement probes from our digital marketing solution on there, capture the data, and we've got an enriched data set.
Super. And have you found the same, Daniel, with the digital enablement of hedge funds and how people are engaging with digital content in your firm and their journey with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think human beings, I love Andy's term, are, analog, right? And so what you really want are these digital touch points behind the scene that express themselves in this analog relationship. Now, traditionally, if you look at a pipeline to sell hedge funds classically aren't sold, but that's how we treated it,
Yeah.
Like we're selling encyclopedias or vacuum cleaners.
Right.
And so it's just not the case that if you email them, they call you and they come in for a meeting, they might not actually be that interested.
Yeah.
And so what are the digital touch points that are indicative of me calling someone, sending them an email, or, that maybe they might want to invest? And that's kind of this better, smarter pipeline, more
Right.
indicative of human behavior here, of this analog relationship.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's what we're trying to build. And the tough part is, I would say that this is kind of the tough part, is a lot of the service providers, not you guys, frankly, but some of our other service providers just don't get that.
Yeah.
They're stuck in this silo of like, we make this product, but they've never thought of the telos of that product, which is to drive sales in this case. So that's been frustrating.
Yeah, and just going on as we kind of wrap up, this is effectively the analog world of selling. It's creating awareness. It's then the consideration. It's then the decision process. It's the service and the loyalty that you create. Whether you're selling vacuum cleaners, encyclopedias, or hedge funds. And the thing that I think where we're finding a lot of a lot of discovery with our clients, and we're finding it just in the industry, is people are just realizing post-pandemic everything has gone digital, and the investor journey, as you both pointed out, is totally digital now. And you're going to have to be creating, as you guys do, thought leadership pieces, website engagement. You're running online, offline events, there's social, there's press, there's inbound, outbound. And you're kind of getting to the point where, as you come to due diligence, you could be at a point where you actually potentially haven't actually seen your investor yet. And, there is lots of people who say, oh, no, we're definitely going to be seeing our investor. But, people aren't going back to do stuff. I know that, for our own mental health, like I'm in the office today, and, my jeans actually did fit today, which is great after a year of cheese and mayonnaise. But, behavior has changed, right? Oh, you like that, guys? There you go. I'm here all week. And
I think you still look good.
And it's the truth as well, by the way. And the investor is different. The investor's faceless. So it's like you said, is how can you get all these touch points aggregated into one place? And just taking your point, Daniel, recently we did a study, and there was another study out as well, that most marketing teams say, right, we need to do social, we need to do website, we need to do all this stuff. But unless the data is aggregated, you actually lose 15% of your efficiency every time you add a new channel and have to then report, in these silos. So for example, if you had to take your thought leadership content on your website, your web stats from Gmail, your inbound, outbound calls, your social, the events you're running into all these spreadsheets, and then put them together with a VLOOKUP or something like that, all the efficiencies you thought you'd gained, you completely lose. So that's kind of another part of the journey that kind of just gets lost, is that if you do end up with kind of, generic individual siloed product at, $30 a month, then the losses you actually incur as you add more products to that set is it's a multiplicative effect as well. It's not that, oh, you've got two channels, you're 30% down. You're not. You're kind of 15 times 15, which to the mathematicians in the audience, I'll leave that one to you. So yeah, so as we wrap up now, we've got a few minutes for questions, and I'd just like to thank Daniel and Andy for your time. Have you got any closing thoughts, Daniel?
I mean, I think my only closing thought is that, you know, people never change, but the ways that we can engage with them become richer and deeper, and you do that through data. And in particular, in our industry, it's just taken a while for service providers to catch up with that back. And so I think it's probably going to be, you know, when I would talk to people back in the day about this stuff, you know, I want this like full system where I can do all that. They just thought you were stupid, and they'd ask like, "What's your Rolodex?" But now that's evolving, and I can just tell in the conversations we're having with people. So I think it's going to be another couple of years, and then everyone's going to be talking this way, 100%.
Right. And Andy, are those your reflections as well, or
yeah,
is it contrary?
Absolutely. I guess it's all a question of your own priorities, and you know, at the end of the day, marketing and sales is a very creative initiative, and you want to be focused on adapting and creating new ways of engaging. So, you know, the reality is with digital marketing and the kind of measurement framework side, you want that to just get bedded in. You don't really want to give it too much thought. And having a specialized product, you know, that kind of having the chief product officer and support guy all contained within a specialist firm that's very much thinking about the problems facing asset managers as an ecosystem. You know, I think it's an excellent balance. So I guess they're my concluding thoughts on that.
All right. Well, thank you both. So I'll just quickly ask the audience: do we have any questions to ask either Daniel, Andy, or myself on this subject? You leave a question, or you can put something in the chat. We are here for the next. Here we go. We got a question. Okay, so Christopher, to Daniel, I believe Daniel spoke about integration inside his CRM with a few different products. Has he been able to integrate other vendor data of ProFundCom, such as sales and asset data, in an automated fashion? Daniel, that one's for you.
Yeah, it's a great question. Kind of is the answer. So we use a CRM, and I said, wouldn't it be great if we could get, back in the day, about 2 years ago, MailChimp data, and MailChimp data would come in. And then I noticed all the MailChimp data was disappearing. And I called them on the phone. I said, hey, this is really good alternative data to have. They said, well, you know what? One user was having like 1 million downloads or some ridiculous thing. So after a month, it disappears. I said, do you realize how valuable that data is? They said, what are you talking about? So what we did with the integration with ProFundCom, and we just did this, was we built an API that goes back and forth. We pushed all the data, all of that traditional data, emails, have I called people, et cetera, into ProFundCom so we can see that nice timeline. And now we're beginning to push that back into the CRM, right? So building that out takes some time. And part of that is, I think Paul definitely understands that entire continuum of the sales process and the data we're trying to glean. It's a little harder to get this bigger team to do that, right? But once we have that API connection linked up, we can slice and dice it any way we want. At the end of the day, what I want is, again, this kind of smarter pipeline that pulls in all the indicative factors and coefficients thereof, where I can predict what I need to do next. And in an automated workflow, say, Dan, call Paul today. He, in the first time in 3 months, is reading your letters, and he's been doing it for an hour each day, whatever it is. So yeah, we're in the midst of doing that, but it's been kind of a struggle. The API was the biggest part. Paul did a great job with our CRM provider, so we're off to the races.
So hopefully, Christopher, that answers your question. David Haslam. David, is there any proof point data to show the trend in the size of assets raised between traditional methods versus digital marketing? Andy, would you like to answer that one?
The way that we kind of track this is simply looking at the engagement trend over time, and initially years ago we would see definitely the asset flows were definitely attributable to offline kind of meeting based referrals, etc. But we are seeing steady, we're seeing evidence of introductions via, for example, a LinkedIn engagement, where there might have been something resonant sent by a member of our sales team. Or it could be as a product of a campaign. We did a content campaign a short while back where we generated something like 300 leads. And off that, we start to see that the gems of these relationships that have occurred digitally over time cultivated then lead to conversion. So obviously, we're playing the long game with this, but we are starting to see evidence that digitally derived leads are leading to conversions. But certainly on the relationship side, that's something that there's a clear link. We are able to cultivate relationships. We're able to see how our clients engage with content, and there's a definite clear value distinction to be drawn.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. And you know what, David, it's one of those things, with ProFundCom, our product is all built around using digital marketing to raise AUM. And that is, our call to arms as a product. So it's not just, when you say digital marketing, some people just think it's email. Well, actually, as I had in the previous slide, it's the whole marketing mix and the commitment to do it. Because what we find, the tension that exists within hedge funds and asset managers is the guys who hold the budget are all economists or mathematicians, and they just want to see numbers. But marketing has a magic to it, and marketing is not digital. It's, as we said, it's analog. It's, why do people do, how do you create, this perceived, superiority in what you do versus, your competition, your other managers. And there is a formula, a tried and tested formula, is in whatever way you communicate three things. You communicate investment strategy, attitude to risk, and performance in that order. And there is however templates I've seen, the ones that do incredibly well are the ones that kind of follow that cadence of what they're writing about. So in answer to your question, traditional methods versus digital marketing, because behaviorally society is changing in a particular way, I think there will be and is a direct correlation. And as Andy said, it may not be imminent that you can see it today, but over time you'll see those that do digital will be the ones that succeed, and those that are traditional may or may not succeed. But I kind of know where I'll be hedging my bets, David. So David, I hope that answered your question. Is there anybody else who wants to take advantage of us three being here for the time being? We will be sending out a replay. So anyone else? Well, on that note, Daniel, happy Friday. Andy, happy Friday. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Paul.
And have a great weekend. And, we do appreciate you joining us and being ProFundCom customers. So thank you both very much. And thank you to our audience and for the questions. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you, Paul.
Pleasure.
See you, gentlemen.
Cheers.